Hello, people on Zoom. We're being recorded now. Hello. I'm just going to get rid of that. There we are. Good. Thank you. Yes, let's see who's here. I have to put my glasses on. I can see you all very well without my glasses, but I just need to look here. Lucy and Dorothy. Jerry. You seem to have grown a beard since yesterday, Jai Ratna.
Maybe you weren't wearing your glasses yesterday.
No, I had a beard.
Great to see you all.
You will.
Yes. So the reason this evening's talk is mysterious because I was at my mum's last week and we were playing Scrabble, and so Avanta sent me a text saying, "Can you give me a title for the talk?" And I was trying to think of a title while I was playing Scrabble. You know, it was impossible to do the two things at once, especially as I was playing for my mum as well. She's got Alzheimer's, so she couldn't really play, so I had to play against myself. So my mind was completely taken up with Scrabble. I couldn't think of a title. So that's why you don't have a title. I didn't even know what I was going to talk about this evening, but I've decided, and I'm going to take just a phrase that the Buddha says in one of the texts. He says it a number of times, and I'm just going to open that out really. And it's in a text from the Dharma called the Uposatha Sutta. And you'll know a little bit about it indirectly, I think, from if you've heard or read his lecture, The Taste of Freedom. Most people do know that one because it's a really well-known one. And that comes from this same text. And what happens is the Buddha, well, things happen, but then afterwards the Buddha gives a teaching, and then the teaching is about the 8 strange and wonderful things about the ocean. Goes through those 8 strange and wonderful things. And then he talks about the Dharma, or the Dharma Vinaya, actually, the Dharma and discipline. And he compares the Dharma with the ocean. And so just as the ocean is like this, the Dharma and Vinaya is like this too. So that's how it goes. But there's something he says 16 times in the text. So here's an example of it. Furthermore, the great ocean contains many precious substances, various precious substances such as these: pearl, crystal, beryl, conch, quartz, coral, silver, gold, ruby, and cat's eye. How he knew that, I don't know, because he didn't live anywhere near the ocean, but I don't know. This is the 7th wonderful and marvelous quality of the great ocean. So that's the 7th one. And then he does all the same, you know, the 8, and then goes into the Dharma being like that. So he says, just as the great ocean contains many precious substances, etc., 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 so also this Dharma and discipline contains many precious things, various precious things, such as the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 right endeavors, the 4 bases of etc., etc. You don't need to know them, but know to them. And at the end of it, this is the 7th wonderful and marvelous quality in this Dharma and discipline, seeing which bhikkhus delight in this Dharma and discipline. So that's the phrase, bhikkhus delight in this Dharma and discipline. And I thought that was interesting. So I looked into it. So if this is a translation by John Ireland, don't need this for a while, put that away. But Thanissaro has a slightly different translation. He says, bhikkhus take great joy in the Dharma and discipline. So you can have delight or great joy. So basically this talk this evening is about taking delight, taking great joy in the Dharma. So I looked into it, as I'd said, and I always like to find the Pali terms and figure out what they actually mean, because every translator has a different take on these words. So I look in the Pali English Dictionary, and if you haven't got one of those, it's a really good thing to have, the Pali English Dictionary. You just have to take a certain word from the Pali English Dictionary, and you've almost got a talk ready. You know, if you don't know what to talk about, just open the Pali English Dictionary and find a word, and there's your talk more or less sorted out, I find anyway. So the word translated as both delight in this and take great joy in this is abhiramanti. abhiramanti. So abhirati means delight or pleasure in. And when Bhante Sangharakshita came back to England, and he was living in London for a few years, then he moved to Norfolk, and he lived in a bungalow, and he called it abhirati. Yeah, I think I visited there once. Abhirati means delight or pleasure in. So that's made up of two words, rati, which means love, attachment, pleasure. Love, attachment, pleasure. And it's good to know that, because you'll probably meet a few order members with rati in their name, Dharma rati being one of them. Can you think of any others? Know any other ratis?
Dhiramati?
Hmm?
Dhiramati?
Dhiramati, yeah. Mati or?
That's a Mati, not a Rati.
Oh, it's a Mati.
Yeah. I always think of The Wind in the Willows with Rati. But that's a different Rati. And so that's Rati, love, attachment and pleasure. And Abhi means very much, greatly. So Abhirati means a lot of delight and pleasure. And then I looked up further, and abhiramati means to sport, enjoy oneself, find pleasure in or with, to indulge in love. To indulge in love, abhiramati. So if you ever meet an order member called abhiramati, you know what that means. Ramati means to enjoy oneself, to delight in, to sport, to find amusement. Now, this might all be boring to you, but I find it really interesting. There's so much about love, pleasure, delight, joy in the text. And this is why I want to give this talk, really, to highlight that. And also, when you, it's a contemplation. Words are really good for contemplation. So you've got the Buddha Vandana, haven't you, which is the contemplation of the qualities of the Buddha, and the Ratnaguna Vandana is the first part of that, is the Buddha Vandana. And it's a practice that you contemplate the words which describe the qualities of the Buddha. So it's a lovely contemplative practice. So I'm reading all these words out to try and to get you in a good mood, really. Abhiramana means sporting, dallying, amusing oneself. That sounds a bit naughty, doesn't it, that one? Ramana, Abhiramana means that, and Ramana means pleasing, charming, joyful. All from the Pali English Dictionary. Yeah, so that's enough of that bit. So what I want to talk about this evening is the importance of taking delight in and having joy in the Dharma. Because if you don't take delight in having joy in it, you're going to run out of steam, I think, which I have done once or twice in my life, or 3 or 4 times. So I'm going to go to another sutta now, which is the Parabhava Sutta from the Sutta Nipata, another ancient text. These actually, the Udana and the Sutta Nipata, are 2 of the most ancient texts that we know of. It's really good going into them because you don't get all the lists that you get in the later texts. And it feels a bit more real, a bit more raw, as if the Buddha's trying to communicate himself somehow, and he hasn't yet found out how best to do that. So the Parabhava Sutta is an interesting one. So what happens here is a Devata just turns up at the Buddha's place, wherever he's staying. So you know what a Devata is? A Devata is a Deva, a goddess or a god. You don't know which sex they are. A kind of magical being from a different realm. So this Devata comes and they ask the Buddha a question, which the Buddha really answers in depth and breadth as well. But I'm just going to give you the beginning of his answer. So the question is, the Devata wants to know about men who decline. They don't get on in life, they decline. And sometimes the translation of Parabhava is downfall, the downfall. So about the declining man, we question you, Gautama. We have come to ask you, what is the cause of a person's downfall? And the Buddha answers, easily known as the progressive one, easily known as the declining one. So in other words, it's easy to know someone who's making efforts and getting on very well with the spiritual life, and it's easy to know the one who's not. The difference is, the lover of the Dharma prospers, the hater of the Dharma declines. Simple answer, isn't it? He says a lot more, but that's his first answer. So I was very interested in this idea that the lover of the Dharma prospers. If you want to make progress in your spiritual life, one of the most important things you have to do is love the Dharma, because we don't always love ourselves very much. And sometimes we can even get into conflict with members of the Sangha. But what you must carry on doing is taking pleasure in and loving the Dharma. And I don't think that means particularly loving the teachings. It can mean that, but I think it means loving the Dharma in its more principial sense of the, well, Praticik Samutpada and so on, the sort of movement towards reality, which is really the Dharma, the things that we do, the way we communicate, the way we think, which help us move in the direction of enlightenment. That should be the objects of our love. And it's quite interesting that we don't really talk in those terms. Whereas, of course, as we know from Padmavajra, who's a great lover of Sufism, he's done a lot of study of Sufism, but in Sufism, there's this whole thing about the beloved, which is not a human being, but the beloved is Allah, or perhaps the symbol of Allah. And it's all about trying to get into contact with the beloved. So I think that's a very powerful kind of image, really. It's a very powerful way of understanding the spiritual life, the beloved. So, of course, I looked up lover of the Dharma. What's that? It's Dharma Kamo. Now, karma is an interesting word. That's just a declension of karma, K-A-M-A, not karma, the law of karma, but karma, K-long-A-M-A, which it's often written in English as karma, K-A-R-M-A. And you might know that there's a very well-known Hindu text called the Kama Sutra. It's all about the pleasures of the flesh, isn't it? It's all about how to make love with people, how best to get the most pleasure out of it, the Kama Sutra. So that's interesting, because this is one of the very many instances where, as in English, a word, depending on the context, can be a positive or negative term. You might have noticed some of the other terms that I was talking about can mean attachment. And here, karma, the love of the Dharma, is the same as fleshly love. It's the same word, but obviously the context is very different. So karma means enjoyment, pleasures of the sense, and therefore sense desire. So Pali English Dictionary tells us, in all enumerations of obstacles to enlightenment, karma occupies the leading position. So that's interesting. Karma is your biggest obstacle to enlightenment, and yet you must use karma to love the Dharma. You have to have the same, I suppose what that's saying is just the same power of love, the same intensity. You have to have that for the Dharma, which is quite a difficult thing to bring about, isn't it? Karma is most frequently connected with passion, impulse, greed, all expressing the active, clinging, and impulsive character of desire. So, I looked up the English dictionary, of course. Delight means enjoyment and happiness. And then I looked up the thesaurus. Don't suppose you do any of this, do you? But I like to do these things. So this is like a meditation now. A meditation on pleasure and delight. So here's what the thesaurus says. Thesaurus: satisfaction, joy, glee, contentment, pleasure, satisfy, gratify, rejoice, thrill, attract, amuse, please, cheer, entertain, charm, enrapture, enchant, wow, fascinate, jollity. So there's all those words which mean, obviously they all mean quite different things from each other, don't they? But they're all in the very positive and pleasurable area of life. So, when the Buddha gives a teaching in the Pali texts, at the end of it, very often, the people who've heard his teachings, whether it's a layman, a Brahmin, or bhikkhu or bhikkhuni, they always delight. They take great joy and delight in what the Buddha just said. Well, that's the same. They take great joy and delight in it. So it has a big effect on people when the Buddha teaches. They don't just go, yeah, that sounds right. Thank you. It's more like they really resonate with it, and they're really, really pleased afterwards. It kind of opens their heart up. So didn't, but sometimes the bhikkhus, as we know, they lost their inspiration. Well, maybe you didn't know that, but that's what happens when you read the Pali Canon through. Look at you, people, for a little while. I've been looking at you guys a lot. When you read the Pali Canon, all these different texts, the monks aren't always getting on very well. Sometimes they've lost it. They've lost their inspiration. They want to go back to the home life, really. And so their fellow monks try to, inspire them. And eventually the Buddha comes along and he tries to do his best. So, but before that, I've just realized, I'm going to tell you, oh yes, that's something I wanted to say before that. No? Oh yes. Well, yeah, before I tell you about the monk who's lost his inspiration, there's something else I want to tell you about. For some reason, the Buddha decides he's going to rejoice in Sariputta's merits. And then he goes on to say something else. But he's talking about Sariputta and his wisdom. And according to the Buddha, Sariputta had 6 kinds of wisdom, 6 kinds. So they are these. Sariputta is astute, and that isn't even one of them. Funny enough, astute is pandito. And, Pundit is someone who's they really know their business. You know about football pundits, don't you? So they really know their business, but not only they know things, but they know it from actually having played. People know it from the inside, from having actually experienced it. But anyway, then he talks about the 6 kinds of wisdom that Sariputta has. And he has great wisdom, widespread wisdom, swift wisdom, sharp wisdom, and penetrating wisdom, and this is the one, laughing wisdom. Laughing wisdom, yeah. Hasa Panya. And there are a few order members, and again, there are a few order members with the name Hasavajra, Harshaprabha, that's the Sanskrit Harshaprabha, and it means smile or it means laughter, yeah. So I really love that, laughing wisdom, isn't that great? And it reminds me of something Bhante once said in a seminar. He was talking about enlightenment, and he said something along the lines of, in some of the Zen texts, you get someone, they gain enlightenment, they just start laughing. They can't help laughing because they see how ridiculous they've been up until now. And they realize what a stupid, utterly ridiculous person they've been going around and projecting outwards, and then they see that and they just can't help but laugh at themselves, which I really like. I don't know if that's the same with Sariputta. So laughing wisdom, the wisdom that makes you really happy, really, that cheers you up. So talking about cheering up, this is another thing. This happened in the Tissa Sutta. There's this guy called Tissa, a monk. He was the Buddha's paternal cousin. And he told all his friends, I've had it now, that's it. He said, my body feels like it's drugged. I'm disoriented. The teachings don't inspire me. And dullness and drowsiness fill my mind. I live the spiritual life dissatisfied and have doubts about the teaching. So I'm going to just concentrate on this thing here. I live the spiritual life dissatisfied. Dissatisfied is a translation of anabhirato, without delight. So the Buddha talks to him and he inspires him again. He talks about the Dharma and so on, asking questions, and they have a conversation, and the Buddha inspires him. And this is the bit I like about this. He says, cheer up, Tissa, cheer up. Abhirama, Tissa. So be joyful, be of good cheer. That was the ancient way of putting it, wasn't it? Now we say cheer up, but it's be of good cheer. Why be of good cheer? Because the Dharma exists. And no matter how low you go, you can always find a way back. There's no point at which there's no way back. So the Dharma is always there for you and for me. And the Buddha goes on to say, I'm here to advise you, to support you, and to teach you. and satisfied. Venerable Tissa was happy with what the Buddha said. And again, the word for happy is connected with abhirati and all those other words. Atamana, delighted, pleased, enraptured. Abhinanditi, delighted. So that's really what I wanted to talk about, the importance of finding some way of enjoying the Dharma. Because if you don't, it's really hard work and it's really hard to keep going. And so I think the question really is, the problem for us is, how do we find that delight? And people find it in different ways, as you know, as you can see. I find delight in reading the text and furrowing into them and finding out what these words mean, and it kind of opens out for me, and then I'm always really cheerful when I'm reading the text. So there's that, but that doesn't work for everyone by any means. I'm in a very small minority of people who like the text, but for others it's meditation. You know, as we know, Vajradevi loves meditation. You know, she lives it and she teaches it and she writes books about it. So that's her great love. I'm sure she's got other loves as well, Vajradevi. And I don't know, some people love pujas, some people love the Sangha, love spiritual friendship. But, you know, whatever it is that causes you great delight and joy, do that. You know, you just hang on to that and do that. You'll do other things as well. I'm not always reading text. I do other things as well. But for me, that's where I get my greatest joy. And that kind of spills over as well. Because if you've got a joy in the Dharma, if you've got something that really makes you happy, when you meet people, you end up talking about it. You can't help it. You know, how have you been? Oh, well, I'm really good. I've just been reading this text. That's what happened with me a lot. And I tell people about the text and we both get really happy about it and excited. And they say they're going to read it. And then sometimes they read it and they think, yeah, it was okay. But yeah, that's the thing to do, isn't it? And then you spread your own joy and delight out. When you meet people, you say, I'm meditating. I'm doing this thing that Vajradevi taught me, and it's really getting a lot out of it. Yeah, so that's how it works. And then the joy and the delight in the Dharma is spread out amongst us, and we share that joy and delight. So I'm going to move on now to another text, which is not a Pali text, it's a Mahayana text. You'll have heard of it for sure. The Vimlikurti Nidesha, or the, that one there we go. The Holy Teaching of Vimlikurti. This is Thurman's translation. There are loads and loads of translations now. You can get this one free on the internet. You can get a PDF version of it and read it. And it's, dear character. I just got distracted there by a postcard in here. Sorry, Vajradevi, there's a postcard in here. What was I saying? Where was I?
You can get it free on the internet. You can get it free on the internet.
That's it. You can download it and read it on screen, or you can put it out. And it's a great text, and it's the one that inspired Bhante. This translation is one that's inspired Bhante to give his series of 8 lectures, which in my opinion is his best series of 8 lectures, called the Inconceivable Emancipation. And that is a joy to listen to, a joy to read. It's really, really brilliant. Yeah, there's, I know this text really well. I've studied it many times, written talks on it, written articles on it. And this one is early on, comes in chapter 4. What happens is Vimlikurti is living out a skillful means. He's pretending to be ill. Yeah, he's laying on his sickbed in his home in the middle of Vaishali. And of course, the Buddha knows. The Buddha's out of town. He's in a great big park. I can't remember the name of the park now. Anyway, he's in a park with loads and loads of bhikkhus. And of course, they're in contact with each other through their minds. So the Buddha knows that Vimlikurti is sick. And Vimlikurti is thinking, why isn't anybody visiting me when I'm sick? This is all part of the skillful means him and the Buddha are playing. So the Buddha says to his monks, look, Vimlikurti is ill. Does anybody want to go and visit him? And they don't want to. Nobody wants to, because he's such a fierce person. And he's always, whatever you're doing, he turns up and he shows you that you're doing it wrong, or you're not doing it right. It's one of those kind of people. And so people don't want to talk to him, because he'll open up what's wrong with your practice and what you've got to change and so on. You're nowhere near where you think you are, kind of thing. You think you're a bodhisattva, but no, you've got a lot to do here. So it's uncomfortable meeting him. So they don't want to. And many people, and the chapters 3 and 4 are just a series of people saying, no, I don't want to, because once I was teaching and he turned up and said I was teaching all wrong, or I was meditating and he turned up and he said I was meditating all wrong, so I don't want to go and see him. So that's what happened. So eventually Manjushri does agree to go and see him, and the rest of the text is based on their conversation, really. But this is towards the end. First of all, the monks don't want to see him, and then the bodhisattvas the same. They don't want to see him either. And eventually you get to this bodhisattva called Jagatindra. This is a lovely, lovely story. So that's what I'm going to do for the rest of the talk, just talk about this story. So Jagatindra, where are we? That's Sudatta. We don't want Sudatta. Ah, yes. So Jagatindra, he's a lay bodhisattva, and he's just leaving his house, just going about his business. This is his story, how we met in Vimlikurti. So he says, Lord, I'm reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness. And then he tells everyone why he's reluctant. So he says, I remember that one day when I was at home, the wicked Mara, right? You know who Mara is, yeah, I guess. Disguised as Indra, the king of the gods, surrounded with 12,000 heavenly maidens, approached me with sounds of music and singing. Having saluted me by touching his feet with his head, the king of the gods, Indra, said to him, he withdrew. Having saluted me by touching his feet with his head, he withdrew with his retinue to one side. And I then, thinking he was Shakra, or Indra, the king of the gods, I said to him, oh, welcome, Kaushika. So there's 3 names here, and they all mean the same thing. Kaushika, Indra, Shakra, they're all the same god. And he gives him a little teaching, which is, it's almost like a platitudinal teaching. You should remain consciously aware in the midst of the pleasures of desire. You should often think on impermanence and strive to utilize the essential in body, life, and wealth. That's exactly what you should say to a god. It's the teaching that gods need, right? So then Mara then said to me, good sir, accept from me these 12,000 divine maidens and make them your servants. Now, this is a no-go for a bodhisattva, because although he's a lay bodhisattva, he also tries to practice complete celibacy. So he doesn't want these 12,000 beautiful maidens. Yeah, so he doesn't know what to do. So then he's like, he doesn't know what to do. And he said, oh, Kaushika, don't offer me, who am religious and a son of the Shakya, things which are not appropriate. It's not proper for me to have these maidens. No sooner had I said these words than the Lichavi Vimlikurti came there and said to me, noble son, do not think this is Indra. This is not Indra, but the evil Mara who has come to ridicule you. So this is the awkward situation that he's suddenly found himself in. He was taken in by Mara, and Vimlikurti has found out, he's found him out in doing this. So what happens then is Vimlikurti said to Mara, evil Mara, since these heavenly maidens are not suitable for this religious devotee, a son of the Shakya, give them to me. Then Mara was terrified and distressed, thinking that the Lichavi Vimlikurti had come to expose him, which he has done, of course. He tried to make himself invisible, but try as he might with all his magical powers, he could not vanish from sight. Then a voice resounded in the sky saying, evil one, give these heavenly maidens to the good man Vimlikurti, Only then will you be able to return to your own abode. So then Mara was even more frightened, and much against his will, he gave Vimlikurti the heavenly maidens. So that's what happens, right? So interestingly, one of the things I find interesting about this text is if you know the text, you assume that Vimlikurti is a bodhisattva, right? Do you assume that about him, that he's a great bodhisattva? Not once in the text does it say that. Not once does it tell you he's a bodhisattva. Interesting. So what is he? But that's for another talk, isn't it? What is or who is Vimlikurti? That's by the by. So then the Lichavi Vimlikurti, having received the goddesses, said to them, now that you have been given to me by Mara, you should all conceive the spirit of unexcelled perfect enlightenment. So the spirit of enlightenment is Thurman's translation of bodhicitta. Yeah, what do we call it? The bodhicitta, the will to enlightenment. We more or less keep it untranslated, don't we? The will to enlightenment, the bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, the heart of enlightenment. Yeah. In other words, become bodhisattvas. You should all try to become bodhisattvas. He then exhorted them with discourse suitable for their development toward enlightenment, and they soon conceived the spirit of enlightenment. So they became bodhisattvas. These 12,000 goddesses all became bodhisattvas. Soon, it says, doesn't tell you how soon. He then said to them, yeah, you have just conceived the spirit of enlightenment. From now on, you should devote yourselves to joy and pleasures in the Dharma, and should take no pleasure in desires. So now we come back to the topic of pleasure and delight. So then they ask him a good question, which is, what is joy in pleasures of the Dharma? And he answers at length. I probably won't read you the whole of his answer, but I'll read some and then I might say something about some of them as we go. He declared, it is the joy of unbreakable faith in the Buddha, of wishing to hear the Dharma, of serving the Sangha, and honouring the spiritual benefactors without pride. So let's just talk about that for a little while. Joy and pleasure in the Dharma. First bit he says is the joy of unbreakable faith in the Buddha. As you know, probably you know this, that unbreakable faith or unshakable faith in the Buddha means that you've at least broken the first three fetters, that you've become a stream entrant. Of course, this is a different method here, they've become bodhisattvas, but it means that you can't fall back from moving towards enlightenment, which is why your faith is unbreakable. Before that, our faith is breakable, which is an interesting idea, isn't it? That our faith can break. And sometimes you've noticed that, or at least it gets damaged somehow. Like Tissa, you know, his faith was broken for a while. So, and you don't want that to happen. So joy in unbreakable faith in the Dharma. So, and then joy of wishing to hear the Dharma, the joy of wishing to hear the Dharma. You know, one of the interesting things about the Pali text, the Pali Suttas, is that even enlightened teachers, people like Sariputra and Moggallana and Kashyapa and Ananda and so on, they love to hear the Dharma still. And when I first came across that, I thought, why? They know it already. They know it from inside, but they still love hearing it. And they used to give Dharma talks to each other. An enlightened person giving Dharma talks to other enlightened beings. Amazing, isn't it? Why? Because they just liked it. It's like, I suppose it's like if you've got a favorite film and, you know, you love that film and you say, oh, let's watch that film. I've got a video of it here. And so you watch it and you've watched it 10 times. But you love watching it and you love the fact that you're introducing it to someone as well. It's a bit like that. You know, they all know everything that the person's saying, but they just love to hear it over and over again. It's a really, really good thing to develop in ourselves, I think, the joy of hearing the Dharma. Because sometimes I think the joy, the delight can be quite low key and we don't really notice it. So it's good to actually notice it and let it grow. Of wishing to hear the Dharma, of serving the Sangha, service, joy in service. You probably experienced that when you're helping out the centre in some way, the joy of that. Definitely a joy, isn't it? and honouring the spiritual benefactors without pride. Spiritual benefactors is Thurman's translation of Kalyana Mitras, spiritual friends, really. So let's call them spiritual friends. Honouring spiritual friends without pride. It is the joy of renunciation of the whole world. Joy of renunciation. And I want to emphasize that because we often think of renunciation as something we really should do, and it's not going to be much fun. But the joy of renunciation, and giving up the whole world, that's what we must focus on. And here I think we need to be clever and careful about the way we do that, because I was around the movement when I was a very young man, and it's the sort of thing when you're young and idealistic, you decide, let's give up the whole world, let's just do it, go for it. And so you give up your record collection and a few other things, and then you miss them a bit later on, and you think, oh, I shouldn't have done that really. I really miss all those Grateful Dead records that I gave away and so on. So you need to be careful about that and not be too idealistic and renounce everything, and then a couple of weeks later you've missed it, because sometimes you can't get them back, can you? You've had it. But yeah, joy in renunciation. I won't do the other ones, they're a bit technical. It's the joy of always guarding the spirit of enlightenment, the bodhicitta, of helping living beings, the joy of helping living beings, of sharing through generosity, of not slackening in morality. Here we've got the 6 paramitars, of control and tolerance in patience, of thorough cultivation of virtue by effort, of total absorption in meditation, the joy of total absorption in meditation, and of absence of passions in wisdom. It is the joy of extending enlightenment, of conquering the maras, of destroying the passions, of purifying the Buddha field. Purifying the Buddha field means making one, basically, building the Buddha land, which is what you're kind of doing here, isn't it? What else? It is the joy of being an ornament of the seat of enlightenment. It's interesting, isn't it? Being an ornament of the seat of enlightenment, whatever that means. It is the joy of serving those of equal fortune, of not hating or resenting those of superior fortune, of serving spiritual friends and avoiding sinful friends. So spiritual friends is Kalyana Mitrata, or Kalyana Mitras, and sinful friends is Mitya. No, Papa, that's it, evil. Papa Mitras. Yeah, you don't want to hang around with Papa Mitras. Yeah, evil friends. It is the joy of the superior gladness of faith and devotion to the Dharma. It is the joy of acquiring liberative techniques, Upaya Kaushalya. That's a weird translation, liberative techniques. Upaya Kaushalya. Skillful means, yeah. And devotion to the Dharma, conscious cultivation of the aids to enlightenment. Thus, the Bodhisattva admires and finds joy in the delights of the Dharma. So that's really the big thing. That's, I think, what we need to try to do in some way. Just like if you're a music fan, you probably picked up that I'm a music fan. I listen to loads and loads of music. It gives me great joy. So I keep on doing it, and it gives me great pleasure. And I don't have to try. You know, it's just like, oh, tonight I really must listen to a piece of music. It's more like get home and I think, what shall I do? Well, I'll listen to a bit of music because it's enjoyable. So Bhante once talked about, he used one of the ideas of Freud, the pleasure principle and the reality principle, but he used them differently than the way Freud did. So we won't go into Freud's understanding of it, but the way Bhante talked about it was, it's a bit like the pleasure principle allied to samatha and the reality principle allied to prajna, wisdom. So what Bhante said was that you need both in the spiritual life. And some people veer too far towards one way. And you may have met people like that, where they're really, really into the Dharma and they're really very serious. And they're not very happy. Yeah. And they're really going for it, perhaps a little bit willfully. And they run out of steam. They can't keep it up. Everything just goes dry for them and they fall away like Tissa. and you don't see them for months and years, and you hear sometime later that they're into something else. That's what happens. If you don't have pleasure, you're not going to carry on. You won't be able to. And then there are other people who really get into it and they just love being around the Sangha, you know, and they're just having a great time, going to pictures with the members of the Sangha, going to the cinema, I should say. Pictures is an old-fashioned thing. And they just love it. And but they don't seem to practice very much. You know, they're not really getting on with their spiritual life. They're just having a great time around people, which is fine. But you need somehow to tread a middle way between those two. You need to make sure that you're really trying to gain wisdom, seriously trying to gain wisdom, but don't make it into this great big mission of walking through the desert kind of thing. That's not going to work. So you need both pleasure and reality, pleasure and reality. Yeah. So what happens next? I'll tell you the rest of it and then we'll finish the talk. So thereupon, Mara said to the goddesses at the end of that teaching, he was probably sitting in the back going, just didn't want the Buddha to be teaching them. He said to the goddesses, now come along and let us all return home. But the goddesses weren't having it. They didn't want to go back to Mara's realm. They said, you gave us to this householder. Now we should enjoy the delights of the Dharma and should no longer enjoy the pleasures of the senses. Good for them. But then Mara said to the literary Vimlikurti, if it is so that the Bodhisattva, the spiritual hero, has no mental attachment and it gives away all his possessions, then householder, please give me these goddesses. A little bit of emotional blackmail going on there, isn't there? Which of course Vimlikurti is impervious to. But Vimlikurti didn't really want them, so he said, they are given, Mara. Go home with your retinue. May you fulfill the religious aspirations of all living beings. That's what he says to Mara. May you fulfill the religious aspirations of all living beings. So he has his place in the wider scheme of things. But then the goddesses got a problem. How are they going to be in the realm of Mara? How are they going to carry on? So they said to Vimlikurti, householder, how should we live in the abode of Mara? And this is the final teaching. This is a really good one. Vimlikurti replied, sisters, there is a door, because they're sisters now, right? They're his sisters in the Dharma. Sisters, there is a door of the Dharma called the inexhaustible lamp. Practice it. What is it? Sisters, a single lamp may light hundreds of thousands of lamps without itself being diminished, like a candle. You know, you can light another candle from that candle and hundreds of them, and that candle doesn't go it doesn't lose its power. Likewise, sisters, a single bodhisattva may establish many hundreds of thousands of living beings in enlightenment without his mindfulness being diminished. I don't know what he's translated as mindfulness. It might be without his practice being diminished. I don't know, without his purpose being diminished, maybe. In fact, not only does it not diminish, it grows stronger. Likewise, the more you teach and demonstrate virtuous qualities to others, the more you grow with respect to those virtuous qualities. So anyone who's done any teachings knows that that is true. I'm not only talking about Dharma teaching, but it is said, isn't it, that you only start to really learn when you try to teach. Because what happens is you hear the lectures and you read the books and you take notes and so on, and you write essays maybe, but it's only when you're teaching that you realize, I've never really quite understood how those two go together. I'm going to have to get that sorted before I give a talk on this. Yeah. So that's one thing that happens, that you have to really get to know your stuff before you give talks. Otherwise, people notice, you know, there's great holes in your logic that don't really work, you know, and then you're afraid of people asking you. This is the thing, isn't it? It's a cheap thing. I really hope they don't ask me a question about that because I don't know the answer. Well, find the answer. And then you've got to, you know, work at it to find the answer. And sometimes that doesn't just mean reading books, it means meditating and having experience that tells you what the answer is. So teaching is a really great way to grow and develop. Yeah, it grows stronger. Likewise, the more you teach and demonstrate virtuous qualities to others, the more you grow with respect to those virtuous qualities. Because when you're teaching, you're living with, for a while, those virtuous qualities. You might prepare a talk, you might write down your notes, you might read about it. And so all that time you're dwelling in those virtuous qualities. And then you dwell again as you're saying them. And saying them has a really big effect. You know this if you read Buddhist texts out loud. This is an ancient Eastern practice. We don't do it very much in our movement, but it's a real practice to actually read a whole text, sometimes hundreds of pages long, a text that you read out. And when you read it, you, in a sense, you embody it at the same time. It's remarkable, really, because we've learned how to read quietly, but when you read loudly, it's a very, very different experience. You begin to embody what the text is telling you. So, yeah, this is the door of the Dharma, called the inexhaustible lamp. When you are living in the realm of Mara, as we are, inspire innumerable gods and goddesses with the spirit of enlightenment. In such a way, you will repay the kindness of the Tathagata, and you will become the benefactors of all living beings. And that's Vimlikurti's teaching to the goddesses. Then those goddesses bowed at the feet of the Lichavi Vimlikurti and departed in the company of Mara. Thus, Lord, remember this is Jagatindra telling the Buddha why he didn't want to go and see Vimlikurti. Thus, Lord, I saw the supremacy of the magical power, wisdom, and eloquence of the Lichavi Vimlikurti, and therefore I am reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness. Yeah. So that's it, folks. That's all I want to say. Vajradevi, thank you for the lending your book to me. And I didn't, in the end, as you see, I didn't actually use the songs in Milarepa, but yeah, thank you. Okay, that's it, folks. The end.